Sarah Martinez had always been underestimated. At 24, she stood barely 5 feet 3 inches tall, with a deceptively slight frame that made people assume she was fragile. They were wrong. Growing up in East Los Angeles, she had learned to fight before she could properly spell her own name. Her father, a former Marine who struggled with alcohol after 3 tours overseas, had taught her that the world was not kind to those who appeared weak. The boxing gym on Cesar Chavez Avenue became her second home when she was 12. Coach Rodriguez, a weathered man with scarred knuckles and knowing eyes, saw something in the angry young girl who showed up every day after school. She had fire in her belly and steel in her spine, qualities that could either destroy a person or forge them into something extraordinary. "You fight like you got nothing to lose," Rodriguez told her after watching her pummel a heavy bag until her knuckles bled. "That's dangerous, Mija. You need to learn to fight smart, not just angry." Sarah absorbed every lesson like a sponge soaking up water. She learned footwork that made her dance around opponents twice her size. She developed hand speed that could land 3 punches before most people could throw one. Most importantly, she learned patience, the ability to wait for the perfect moment to strike. By 18, she had won the California Golden Gloves Championship in her weight class twice. College scouts came calling, offering full scholarships to universities she had only seen in movies. But Sarah had different plans. The military recruiter who visited her high school had painted a picture of adventure, purpose, and the chance to serve something greater than herself. Her decision to enlist in the Navy surprised everyone except Coach Rodriguez. "The ocean's just a bigger ring," he told her the night before she left for boot camp. "Same rules apply. Stay calm, stay smart, and when the time comes, hit harder than they expect." Great Lakes Naval Training Center in Illinois was a shock to her system. The cold bit through every layer of clothing she owned, and the endless gray of the lake seemed to stretch into infinity. But the physical challenges felt familiar. The push-ups, sit-ups, and long runs were just different versions of the training she had been doing for years. What challenged her more were the assumptions. Her drill instructors, all male, clearly expected her to wash out. The other recruits, mostly young men from small towns and suburbs, looked at her like she was an exotic curiosity. They whispered about the girl from the ghetto who thought she could play with the big boys. Petty Officer First Class Williams, her primary drill instructor, was a mountain of a man from Georgia with a voice that could shatter glass. He seemed to take particular pleasure in pushing Sarah harder than the rest. Extra laps around the track in freezing rain. Additional push-ups when the rest of the company was dismissed. Clean-up duties that kept her scrubbing floors until midnight. "You think this is some kind of game, Martinez?" He would bark in her face, his breath steaming in the cold air. "You think because you can throw a punch, you can handle what we do out there? This isn't your neighborhood gym, little girl." Sarah never responded with words. Instead, she responded with performance. When Williams ordered her to do 50 push-ups, she did 75. When he told her to run 3 miles, she ran 4. When he assigned her extra duties, she completed them perfectly and asked if there was anything else. Her fellow recruits began to notice. Jackson, a farm boy from Nebraska who stood 6'4" and had arms like tree trunks, started following her lead during physical training. "If she can do it, I sure as hell can," he would mutter through gritted teeth as they cranked out another set of burpees. The turning point came during the 3rd week of training. The company was running a timed obstacle course that included rope climbing, wall scaling, and low crawls through mud. Sarah had been consistently posting the fastest times, but Williams seemed determined to break her spirit. "You're holding everyone back, Martinez," he announced in front of the entire company as they lined up for another attempt. "Maybe you should consider a different branch of service. I hear the Coast Guard is more suited to people of your stature." The comment hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah felt the familiar fire building in her chest, the same feeling she got right before landing a knockout punch. But instead of exploding, she channeled it into focus. She attacked the course like a woman possessed, up the rope in record time, her small hands finding grip where others struggled, over the wall with fluid grace, using momentum and technique rather than brute strength. Through the mud crawl faster than recruits twice her size, her low profile actually working to her advantage. When the whistle blew, she had beaten her own record by 15 seconds. More importantly, she had beaten the course record held by a male recruit from the previous year. The silence that followed was deafening. Williams stared at the stopwatch in his hand like it had betrayed him. The other recruits stared at Sarah like she had just performed magic. She stood at attention, mud streaked across her face, breathing hard but not showing any other sign of exertion. "Well, I'll be damned," Williams finally said, his voice lacking its usual edge. "Looks like we might have a sailor after all." Word of Sarah's performance spread through the training command like wildfire. Instructors from other companies started showing up to watch her run courses. Senior chiefs who had been in the Navy for decades came by to see the small woman who was breaking records left and right. But Sarah remained focused on the bigger picture. Boot camp was just the beginning. She had her sights set on something that everyone told her was impossible for someone like her. During the career counseling session in week 7, she sat across from a chief petty officer who looked like he could bench press a car. "So, Martinez, what rate are you thinking about? We could use good people in administration, or maybe culinary specialist. With your background, I bet you'd make an excellent master at arms." Sarah looked him directly in the eye. "I want to try for special operations, Chief." The man nearly choked on his coffee. "Special ops? You mean like Navy SEALs?" "That's exactly what I mean, Chief." He leaned back in his chair, studying her like she had just claimed she could fly. "Martinez, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've seen a lot of tough kids come through here. But what you're talking about, it's not just about being tough. It's about being stronger, faster, and more resilient than 99% of the population. The failure rate is astronomical." "What's the failure rate for people who don't try, Chief?" The question caught him off guard. He shuffled through her file, looking at her test scores and performance evaluations. Everything was stellar. Her physical fitness scores were in the 99th percentile. Her academic performance was outstanding. Her leadership potential ratings were through the roof. "The pipeline is brutal, Martinez. I'm talking about months of the most intense physical and mental challenges you can imagine. Grown men, big strong guys who played college football, wash out in the first week. Are you sure you wouldn't rather consider something more practical?" Sarah thought about Coach Rodriguez, about all the nights she had stayed late in the gym when everyone else had gone home. She thought about her father, whose demons had never let him reach his potential. She thought about every person who had ever looked at her and seen only limitations. "Chief, I've been preparing for this my whole life. I just didn't know it until now." The chief studied her for a long moment, then reached for a different stack of paperwork. "All right, Martinez. I'll put you in for the screening process. But I want you to understand something. This isn't about proving a point or breaking barriers. If you make it through, it's because you earned it. Nothing more, nothing less. I wouldn't want it any other way, Chief." As boot camp neared its end, Sarah found herself becoming an unofficial leader among her fellow recruits. They looked to her not because she was the loudest or most domineering, but because she led by example. When someone was struggling with a task, she was the first to offer help. When the company faced a group challenge, she was the one who helped develop strategies that played to everyone's strengths. Williams, who had gone from antagonist to reluctant admirer, pulled her aside during the final week. "You know, Martinez, when you first showed up here, I thought you were just another wannabe trying to prove something. I was wrong." "Thank you, Petty Officer Williams." "Don't thank me yet. What you're trying to do next, it's going to make boot camp look like summer camp. You sure you're ready for that kind of hell?" Sarah looked out at the gray expanse of Lake Michigan, thinking about the journey that had brought her this far. "Petty Officer Williams, I've been ready my whole life. I just needed to get here first." Graduation day arrived with crisp autumn air and the proud tears of families who had traveled from across the country. Sarah's mother, sister, and Coach Rodriguez sat in the front row, their faces beaming with pride. Her father had chosen not to come, still locked in his own battles. But she carried his lessons with her nonetheless. As she marched across the stage to receive her certificate, Sarah felt the weight of possibility settling on her shoulders. Boot camp had been about learning to be a sailor. The next phase would be about becoming something more, something that most people believed was impossible for someone like her. Standing at attention during the final ceremony, she caught sight of a group of instructors watching from the side. Among them was a man with a distinctive pin on his uniform, the golden eagle, anchor, and trident of a Navy SEAL. He was studying her with the same intensity she had once reserved for opponents in the boxing ring. After the ceremony, as families celebrated and new sailors said their goodbyes, the SEAL instructor approached her. He was tall, lean, and moved with the fluid confidence of someone who had survived things most people could only imagine. Seaman Martinez? I'm Senior Chief Peterson. I hear you're interested in joining our community. Yes, Senior Chief. More than interested. Peterson studied her with pale blue eyes that seemed to see everything. You know what you're signing up for? I know it's going to be the hardest thing I've ever done, Senior Chief. That's not what I asked. Do you know what you're signing up for? Sarah met his gaze without flinching. I'm signing up to become the best version of myself, Senior Chief. To serve at the highest level possible. To earn my place among warriors. Peterson nodded slowly. Report to Coronado in 30 days. Don't show up thinking your boxing skills or your boot camp records mean anything. Show up ready to discover what you're really made of. As he walked away, Sarah felt a familiar sensation in her chest. Not the angry fire of her youth, but the steady burn of purpose. She had spent her entire life preparing for challenges that seemed impossible to others. Now she was about to face the ultimate test. Coach Rodriguez appeared at her side, his weathered face split by a proud grin. So, Mija, what's next? The bus ride to Naval Amphibious Base Coronado felt like a journey to another planet. Sarah Martinez pressed her face to the window as they crossed the Coronado Bridge, watching the Pacific Ocean stretch endlessly toward the horizon. Below, she could see the famous beaches where countless Navy SEAL candidates had either found their limits or discovered they had none. 27 other hopefuls shared the bus with her, and she was the only woman among them. The silence was heavy with nervous energy and unspoken doubts. Some of the men were massive, looking like they had been carved from granite. Others were lean and wiry, with the focused intensity of distance runners. A few kept stealing glances at her, clearly wondering if this was some kind of joke. Petty Officer Second Class Kowalski, sitting 2 rows ahead, finally voiced what several of them were thinking. No offense, but are you sure you're on the right bus? The base has lots of different programs. Sarah didn't look away from the window. Same bus you're on, Kowalski. Same destination. I'm just saying, this isn't exactly. He fumbled for words that wouldn't sound completely offensive. Isn't exactly what? Made for people like me? Sarah turned to face him, her voice calm, but firm. Good thing I didn't ask for anyone's opinion about what I'm made for. The exchange drew attention from the other candidates. Thompson, a former college wrestler from Texas who looked like he could bench press a refrigerator, leaned forward. Look, we're all on the same team here. No need to get defensive. I'm not defensive, Sarah replied evenly. I'm focused. There's a difference. The bus pulled through the gates of the naval base, and conversation died entirely. Through the windows, they could see groups of candidates running in formation, their faces masks of determined suffering. Instructors jogged alongside them, shouting encouragement and criticism in equal measure. At the basic underwater demolition/SEAL, BUD/S compound, the bus came to a stop. Before anyone could move, the door hissed open and a figure stepped aboard. Senior Chief Peterson looked exactly as Sarah remembered from boot camp graduation. Tall, lean, and radiating the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove to anyone. Gentlemen, his voice carried easily through the bus. And, lady, welcome to the first day of the rest of your lives. Some of you will find out that the rest of your life is very short. Others will discover capabilities you never knew you possessed. His eyes found Sarah in the crowd. When you step off this bus, you are no longer individuals with personal histories and individual concerns. You are candidates. Your only job is to meet the standard. The standard does not care about your background, your gender, your size, or your previous accomplishments. The standard simply is. The candidates filed off the bus in silence. Sarah shouldered her sea bag and followed the group toward a series of weathered buildings that would be home for the next several months. The base buzzed with activity, regular Navy personnel going about their duties, advanced SEAL trainees engaged in specialized training, and other candidate classes at various stages of the pipeline. Their first stop was medical processing, where Navy corpsmen checked everything from blood pressure to flexibility. Sarah noticed the medical staff paying special attention to her, asking additional questions about previous injuries and taking extra measurements. She understood why. The physical demands of SEAL training pushed human bodies to their absolute limits, and her smaller frame would face unique challenges. Dr. Martinez, no relation, despite the shared name, was the senior medical officer overseeing candidate processing. She was a compact woman in her 40s with the weathered look of someone who had spent considerable time in challenging environments. "You know what you're getting into, Seaman Martinez?" the doctor asked as she reviewed Sarah's medical files. "I know it's going to test everything I have, ma'am." "That's not what I mean. The physical demands of this training were designed around the average male body. Statistically speaking, you're going to be working at a higher percentage of your maximum capacity just to meet minimum standards." Sarah had heard variations of this speech before. "Ma'am, with respect, I've been working at maximum capacity my whole life." "It's familiar territory." Dr. Martinez made a note in the file. "We'll see. But I want you to understand something. There's no shame in recognizing when your body has reached its limits. Pushing beyond those limits isn't courage, it's stupidity. And stupidity gets people killed in this business." "Understood, ma'am." After medical processing came gear issue. The candidates lined up at a supply window where bored-looking storekeepers distributed everything from combat boots to diving masks. When Sarah reached the front of the line, the storekeeper looked confused. "We don't have any gear in your size, miss. This is all sized for male candidates." Senior Chief Peterson appeared as if from nowhere. "Then, you'll modify it to fit, Petty Officer Jameson. Or find gear that does fit. That candidate is here on the same orders as everyone else." "But, Senior Chief, the boots alone are your problem to solve, not mine. And certainly not hers. Figure it out." An hour later, Sarah emerged with equipment that had been hastily modified or substituted. Her boots were the smallest size available, stuffed with extra padding. Her wet suit had been taken in at the shoulders and waist. Her helmet rattled slightly when she moved her head. It wasn't perfect, but it would have to do. The first official training evolution began at 0500 the next morning. The candidates assembled on the beach in the pre-dawn darkness, shivering in shorts and t-shirts as Pacific waves crashed nearby. Instructor Chief Watson paced in front of them like a caged predator. "Welcome to your new reality," Watson announced. "For the next 6 months, this beach will be your workplace, your classroom, and sometimes your bed. Some of you think you know what hard work looks like. You're about to find out you were wrong." Physical training, PT, began immediately. Push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, and running formed the foundation, but these weren't the casual exercises from boot camp. Everything was timed, everything was graded, and everything was designed to find the breaking point of each candidate. Sarah quickly realized that her boxing background, while helpful, had only partially prepared her for this level of sustained physical punishment. The repetitive nature of SEAL PT was unlike anything she had experienced. It wasn't about explosive power or technique. It was about grinding through discomfort until discomfort became normal. During the first week of conditioning runs, she found herself falling behind the main group. Her shorter stride meant she had to take more steps to cover the same distance, and the accumulating fatigue was significant. Thompson, the wrestler from Texas, slowed down to pace alongside her during one particularly brutal session. "You're working twice as hard as everyone else," he panted as they struggled to keep up. "Then, I guess I'll get twice as strong," Sarah replied through gritted teeth. The comment reached the ears of Instructor Chief Rodriguez, a different Rodriguez from her boxing coach, who jogged up behind them. "Is that so, Candidate Martinez? You think this is about getting strong?" "I think it's about not quitting, Chief." "Interesting theory. Let's test it. Both of you, side straddle hops until I get tired of watching." For the next 20 minutes, Sarah and Thompson performed jumping jacks on the beach while the rest of the class continued their run. Their legs burned, their lungs screamed, and salt from dried sweat stung their eyes. Other instructor staff members gathered to watch, some making bets about when the two would collapse. Sarah focused on a technique Coach Rodriguez had taught her years earlier, breaking the pain down into manageable pieces. Don't think about 20 minutes of jumping jacks. Think about the next 10 seconds. Then, the next 10 seconds after that. Make each moment survivable, and, eventually, the moment will pass. When Chief Rodriguez finally called a halt, both candidates were swaying on their feet, but still moving. "Not bad," he admitted grudgingly. Now double time it to catch up with your class. Sarah and Thompson took off at a sprint, their legs like rubber, but their determination intact. They caught up with the main group just as the run was ending, earning nods of respect from some of their fellow candidates. But the real challenges were just beginning. The famous surf torture evolution came during the second week. Candidates were required to lie in the frigid Pacific surf for extended periods, allowing waves to crash over them while maintaining military bearing. The water temperature was in the low 60s, cold enough to cause hypothermia if exposure continued too long. Sarah's smaller body mass meant she lost heat faster than her larger classmates. Within minutes of entering the water, she was shivering uncontrollably. Within 10 minutes, her teeth were chattering so violently she couldn't speak clearly. The instructors watched her carefully, ready to pull her out if she showed signs of serious hypothermia. But Sarah had learned to compartmentalize suffering. She focused on breathing, on maintaining military bearing, on anything except the bone-deep cold that was making her body rebel. Around her, bigger men were already showing signs of breaking, some crying, some begging to be allowed out of the water. Candidate Martinez. Chief Watson's voice cut through the sound of crashing waves. How are you feeling? Outstanding, Chief. Sarah managed to shout back, her voice steady despite her chattering teeth. Outstanding? Really? Because you look like you're about to turn into a popsicle. Just getting warmed up, Chief. The response drew laughter from some of the instructors and amazed stares from her fellow candidates. Here was someone half their size, clearly suffering more than anyone else, maintaining a positive attitude and military bearing. After 30 minutes that felt like 30 hours, the evolution ended. The candidates were allowed to warm up gradually, drinking hot coffee and doing light exercise to restore circulation. Sarah's skin was blue-white, and she couldn't stop shaking, but she had outlasted several larger candidates who had been removed earlier due to safety concerns. Thompson wrapped a towel around her shoulders. How the hell did you do that? Practice, Sarah replied simply, accepting a cup of coffee with hands that shook so badly she could barely hold it. Practice? When did you practice hypothermia? You ever been cold because your family couldn't afford heat? You ever been hungry because there wasn't enough food? When you've been uncomfortable your whole life, comfortable becomes the unusual thing. The comment sobered the group around her. Most of these men came from middle-class backgrounds where discomfort was temporary and optional. For Sarah, managing discomfort had been a survival skill since childhood. As the weeks progressed, a pattern emerged. In events that favored pure size and strength, Sarah struggled to meet standards. Pull-ups were particularly challenging. Her grip strength was excellent from boxing, but she simply didn't have the upper body mass of her male counterparts. She compensated by doing additional training during personal time, often staying up late to work on weaknesses. But in events that required mental toughness, pain tolerance, or technical skill, she excelled. During underwater knot-tying exercises, her smaller hands and patient approach made her one of the fastest in the class. In navigation exercises, her attention to detail and systematic approach consistently produced accurate results. The instructors began to notice. Chief Watson, who had initially seemed skeptical of her presence, started using her as an example during classes on mental toughness. Some of you think being tough means being big and loud, he told one group of struggling candidates. Candidate Martinez is probably working harder than any of you, but you don't hear her complaining. She just adapts and keeps moving forward. But adaptation came with a price. The constant strain of working at maximum capacity to meet minimum standards was wearing her down. During the fourth week, her body began showing signs of overuse. Her knees ached constantly. Her shoulders were chronically sore from compensation patterns developed during pull-up sessions. Sleep became elusive as her body struggled to recover from each day's punishment. The breaking point came during a night navigation exercise. The candidates were required to swim over a mile in complete darkness, navigate to specific points underwater, and complete tasks that required fine motor control while exhausted. Sarah had been fighting a low-grade fever for 2 days, but hadn't reported it to medical staff for fear of being dropped from training. Halfway through the swim, hypothermia and exhaustion combined with her illness to create a dangerous situation. Her stroke became uncoordinated. Her navigation became erratic. Instructor Chief Martinez, the third Rodriguez/Martinez coincidence of her military career, was monitoring her progress and recognized the signs of a candidate in trouble. Martinez, to me now. Sarah tried to change course toward the instructor's voice, but her body wasn't responding properly. The cold water that had been merely uncomfortable became genuinely threatening as her core temperature dropped. She felt herself slipping toward unconsciousness. Strong hands grabbed her and hauled her toward a safety boat. Chief Martinez and two other instructors pulled her from the water and immediately began warming procedures. Her core temperature was dangerously low, and her altered mental state indicated the early stages of severe hypothermia. "Why didn't you report that you were sick?" Chief Martinez demanded as they wrapped her in warming blankets. Sarah's thinking was still clouded, but her priorities remained clear. Couldn't risk being dropped. "You could have died, Martinez. Is this program worth dying for? Is it worth doing if it's not?" The question hung in the air as they transported her to the medical facility. Dr. Martinez, yet another coincidence, was waiting with a team of corpsmen. Sarah's core temperature was 94 degrees Fahrenheit, low enough to be life-threatening. As they worked to stabilize her condition, Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness. In her fevered state, she found herself back in the boxing gym with Coach Rodriguez, hearing his voice echo through her mind. "Sometimes the most important fight is knowing when to rest so you can fight another day." When she regained full consciousness 12 hours later, Dr. Martinez was sitting beside her bed. "How are you feeling, Seaman Martinez?" "Like I got hit by a truck, ma'am. But I'm ready to get back to training." "That's not going to happen for a while. You're going to be on medical hold until we're satisfied that you've fully recovered. This could set you back weeks, possibly months." Sarah felt her heart sink. Medical hold often meant the end of a SEAL candidacy. The training pipeline was carefully timed, and missing significant portions usually meant starting over with a new class, if you were allowed to try again at all. "Ma'am, is there any way?" "There's no negotiation here, Martinez. You pushed your body beyond safe limits. That shows dedication, but it also shows poor judgment. In the SEAL community, poor judgment doesn't just hurt you, it can get your teammates killed." Medical hold felt like purgatory. For 3 weeks, Sarah Martinez watched from the sidelines as her original class continued through training without her. She attended mandatory medical appointments, underwent physical therapy for overuse injuries, and fought the crushing feeling that her SEAL dreams were slipping away. The base medical facility became her unwanted second home. Physical therapist Chief Petty Officer Williams worked with her daily, addressing the compensation patterns that had developed from months of pushing her smaller frame beyond its design limits. The sessions were methodical and boring compared to the intense training she craved. "Your left shoulder is compensating for lack of lat strength," Williams explained as he manipulated her arm through range of motion exercises. "Your knees are tracking inward because your hip flexors are chronically tight from overuse. You've been building a house of cards, Martinez." "What's that supposed to mean, Chief?" "Means you've been working harder instead of working smarter. Your body adapted to meet minimum standards, but those adaptations created weaknesses. In sustained operations, those weaknesses would have become failures." The assessment stung because it was accurate. Sarah had approached SEAL training the same way she had approached everything else in her life, with brute force determination and the willingness to absorb more punishment than anyone else. But SEAL operations required sustainability over months and years, not just weeks. Dr. Martinez visited regularly to monitor her recovery and, Sarah suspected, to evaluate her psychological state. The conversations were always professional but probing, designed to determine whether she had learned from her experience or was simply waiting for another chance to repeat the same mistakes. "What would you do differently?" Dr. Martinez asked during one session. "I'd report the fever, ma'am. I'd recognize that hiding medical issues doesn't make me tougher. It makes me a liability." "That's a start. What else?" Sarah had been thinking about this constantly. "I'd train smarter during off hours. Instead of just doing more of what I was already struggling with, I'd focus on building the foundation strength I was missing. And I'd ask for help. I'd learn from the candidates who were excelling in areas where I was struggling, instead of just grinding through on my own." Dr. Martinez made notes in her file. Those are good insights. The question is whether you can implement them under pressure. The hardest part of medical hold was watching her original classmates continue without her. Thompson, the wrestler who had become her closest ally, stopped by occasionally to share updates. The news was sobering. They were in the middle of Hell Week, the legendary 5.5 days of continuous training that broke more candidates than any other single event. Rodriguez quit yesterday, Thompson reported after one particularly brutal session. Just walked up to the instructors and rang the bell 3 times. Said he couldn't take another minute. Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions. Rodriguez had been one of the strongest candidates in the class, someone she had looked up to as seemingly unbreakable. If he could reach his limit, anyone could. How many are left? 18 out of the original 28. And we're only halfway through. The mathematics were stark. More than 1/3 of the candidates had already been eliminated, and the most challenging portions of training still lay ahead. Sarah watched through the medical facility windows as her former classmates stumbled through the compound, their faces hollow with exhaustion, but their determination still intact. "Do you think I could have made it through?" she asked Thompson during one of his visits. He was quiet for a long moment, his usual easy confidence replaced by thoughtful consideration. "Honestly, the way you were going? No. You were already running on fumes before Hell Week started. You would have broken down somewhere around day 3. The brutal honesty was exactly what Sarah needed to hear, even though it hurt. She had been telling herself that medical hold was just bad luck, that she had been ready for anything the instructors could throw at her. Thompson's assessment forced her to confront the reality that her approach had been unsustainable from the beginning. But, Thompson continued, if you can figure out how to channel that determination more intelligently, I think you could do things that would surprise everyone, including yourself. The comment stuck with her as she threw herself into recovery and preparation. Instead of viewing medical hold as lost time, she began treating it as an opportunity to rebuild herself from the ground up. She studied every aspect of SEAL training, reading manuals, and talking to instructors about optimal preparation strategies. Chief Williams, the physical therapist, became an unexpected mentor. He had been a SEAL himself before a parachuting injury ended his operational career, and he understood the mental challenges of the pipeline as well as the physical ones. "You know what separates the guys who make it through from the guys who don't?" he asked one day as Sarah worked through a complex stability exercise. "Physical capacity, that's part of it, but not the biggest part. The guys who make it through are the ones who can adapt their approach when circumstances change. They don't just endure, they evolve." Williams introduced her to training methods she had never encountered. Instead of just adding more volume to her workouts, they focused on movement quality and efficiency. Instead of just building strength, they built resilience, the ability to maintain performance under accumulated stress. "Your boxing background is actually an advantage," Williams explained as he watched her work through a complex movement sequence. "Boxers understand technique under pressure. They understand that when you're exhausted, fundamentals become even more important, not less important." The insight was revolutionary for Sarah. She had been approaching SEAL training like a long boxing match, trying to outlast her opponents through superior conditioning and will. But Williams was suggesting a different approach, treating it like coaching others while fighting herself, focusing on technical excellence that would allow her to maintain performance when others were breaking down. 6 weeks into medical hold, Sarah received news that would change everything. She was being offered the opportunity to join the next candidate class, which would begin Phase 1 training in 2 weeks. The decision would require sign-off from Dr. Martinez, Chief Williams, and the training command leadership. "Are you ready?" Dr. Martinez asked during the final medical evaluation. "Ma'am, I'm stronger than I was when I started. But, more importantly, I'm smarter." "Prove it." The challenge came in the form of a comprehensive fitness test that exceeded the normal entrance standards. Sarah would need to demonstrate not just that she could meet minimum requirements, but that she had built sufficient reserves to sustain performance throughout the entire training pipeline. The test took place at dawn on the beach where she had first struggled with surf torture. This time, the cold water felt manageable rather than overwhelming. Her stroke was efficient and sustainable rather than desperate. When she completed the swimming portion, she wasn't gasping for air. She was ready for whatever came next. The pull-up portion had been her nemesis in the original class. This time, she approached the bar with a completely different technique. Instead of trying to muscle through with pure upper body strength, Williams had taught her to use her entire kinetic chain. The result was fluid, efficient movement that allowed her to exceed her previous best performance by 30%. But the real test came in the long run that concluded the evaluation. This wasn't just about covering the required distance in the required time. It was about demonstrating the kind of sustainable pace that would serve her throughout months of training. Sarah settled into a rhythm that felt almost meditative. Her breathing was controlled, her stride was efficient, and her mind was calm. Instead of fighting the distance, she embraced it. Instead of grinding through discomfort, she found flow. When she crossed the finish line, she wasn't just within the time standard. She had set a personal record. More importantly, she felt like she could have continued for significantly longer. The improvement wasn't just physical, it was fundamental. Senior Chief Peterson was waiting at the finish line with a stopwatch and an expression that revealed nothing. Not bad, Candidate Martinez. How do you feel? Like I'm just getting started, Senior Chief. That's what I like to hear. Report to Class 352 on Monday morning. Don't make me regret giving you a second chance. The weekend before joining her new class was a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Sarah knew she would be entering a group that had already bonded through shared suffering while she had been recovering on the sidelines. She would need to prove herself all over again, not just to the instructors, but to her new classmates. Class 352 was smaller than her original group. Only 24 candidates, including several who had been medically held from previous classes for various injuries. The diversity of backgrounds was striking: former college athletes, prior service veterans, and men from every conceivable profession and geographic region. What struck Sarah immediately was the maturity level of this group compared to her original class. These weren't wide-eyed recruits fresh from civilian life. They were individuals who had already been tested by the training pipeline and chosen to continue despite knowing exactly what lay ahead. The class leader was Petty Officer First Class Jackson, a soft-spoken former Marine recon operator who had cross-trained to pursue SEAL qualification. During their first meeting, he addressed Sarah directly with characteristic bluntness. "You're the one who was medically dropped from 351. That's right, Petty Officer Jackson. Good. Means you know what mistakes not to repeat. We're going to need everyone operating at their highest level if we're going to make it through this together." The acceptance was immediate and complete. These men understood that SEAL training was about collective success as much as individual achievement. They needed every member of the team to succeed for any of them to make it through the most challenging phases ahead. Sarah's first week with Class 352 revealed how much she had truly learned during her time in medical hold. Evolutions that had previously left her gasping and struggling now felt manageable. Her improved technique and sustainable pacing allowed her to maintain performance throughout long training days. More importantly, her approach to challenging situations had fundamentally changed. Instead of attacking every problem with maximum aggression, she learned to read situations and apply appropriate levels of effort. Sometimes that meant explosive action. Sometimes it meant patient persistence. The transformation became most apparent during a night navigation exercise similar to the one that had nearly ended her candidacy the first time. The water was just as cold, the distance was just as challenging, and the technical requirements were just as demanding. But Sarah's approach was completely different. She had prepared meticulously, studying tide tables and current patterns. She paced herself from the beginning, maintaining a stroke rate that she knew she could sustain for the entire distance. Most importantly, she monitored her own condition constantly, ready to make adjustments before problems became crises. When she reached the final checkpoint, Instructor Chief Martinez was waiting with the same stopwatch he had used months earlier. "How are you feeling, Candidate Martinez?" "Strong and ready for more, Chief." "That's a very different answer than you gave me last time." "I'm a very different candidate than I was last time, Chief." Martinez studied her for a long moment, noting the controlled breathing, the alert posture, and the complete absence of the desperate exhaustion that had characterized her previous attempt. "Yes, you are. The question now is whether you can maintain that evolution under the most extreme pressure we can create." Sarah understood what he was referring to. Hell Week was approaching for Class 352, and this time she would face it not as someone hanging on by sheer determination, but as a prepared warrior with the tools and mindset necessary to thrive under extreme conditions. I guess we'll find out, Chief. Hell Week began at sunset on a Sunday evening with an event the instructors called Breakout. Without warning, Class 352 was awakened by explosive charges detonating around their barracks, followed by instructors storming through the building with bullhorns, blank ammunition, and simulated artillery fire. Sarah Martinez jolted awake as her bunk shook from a controlled explosion just outside her window. Around her, 23 other candidates scrambled to respond to shouted commands that were deliberately confusing and contradictory. This was intentional chaos, designed to create immediate stress and confusion. Get out! Get out! Get out! Instructor Chief Rodriguez screamed as he fired blank rounds from an M60 machine gun positioned in the hallway. We're under attack. Move! 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 Sarah grabbed her gear and rushed toward the exit with her classmates, her heart pounding but her mind surprisingly clear. The medical hold period had given her time to study previous Hell Week accounts, and she recognized this as psychological warfare rather than genuine emergency. Outside, the candidates assembled in the surf zone as instructors continued the simulated battle around them. Smoke grenades created an otherworldly atmosphere, while loudspeakers blared artillery sounds and machine gun fire. The message was clear: for the next 5.5 days, comfort and predictability would cease to exist. Senior Chief Peterson appeared through the smoke like a figure from a war movie. His voice cut through the chaos with calm authority that somehow made the situation even more intimidating. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hell Week. For the next 132 hours, you will be tested in ways that will reveal who you really are. Some of you will discover reserves of strength you never knew you possessed. Others will find their breaking points and make the intelligent decision to pursue other opportunities. He paced in front of the shivering candidates as explosions continued in the background. The rules are simple. Follow all orders immediately and completely. Maintain military bearing at all times. Take care of your teammates. And remember, the only easy day was yesterday. What followed was an immediate immersion into sustained physical and psychological pressure unlike anything Sarah had previously experienced. The candidates were ordered into the surf for surf torture, lying in the frigid Pacific while waves crashed over them for what felt like hours, but was probably 30 minutes. Sarah's improved cold water tolerance, developed during her medical hold training, served her well. While several classmates were already showing signs of hypothermia, she maintained control of her breathing and mental state. The key was accepting the cold rather than fighting it, allowing her body to adapt rather than panic. When they were finally ordered out of the water, the real challenge began. Log PT required teams of 6 candidates to lift, carry, and manipulate 400-pound telephone poles through a series of increasingly complex exercises. The logs were wet, slippery, and designed to create maximum friction between team members under stress. Sarah found herself assigned to a crew led by Jackson, the former Marine who had become the unofficial class leader. The other members were Williams, a former Army Ranger; Thompson, her ally from the original class who had been held back due to injury; Rodriguez, no relation to the various instructors; and Burke, a former college football player who stood 6'6" and weighed 250 pounds. The size disparity within the boat crew was immediate and obvious. Sarah, at 5 feet 3 inches and 130 pounds, was dwarfed by her teammates. But rather than seeing this as a disadvantage, Jackson quickly recognized how to leverage the difference. Martinez, you take point on coordination, he decided as they prepared for their first evolution. Your height gives you the best view of foot placement and obstacles. Call out timing for the lifts. The wisdom of this decision became apparent during the first log carry evolution. While other crews struggled with coordination due to height mismatches, Sarah's clear commands and precise timing allowed her crew to move their log with surprising efficiency. Her boxing background had taught her the importance of rhythm and timing under pressure. Up, 2 steps. Plant. Rotate left. Her voice cut through the chaos as her teammates responded instinctively to her commands. The result was fluid movement that caught the attention of instructor staff. But the real test of her transformation came during the first major mental challenge of Hell Week, the steel pier evolution. Candidates were required to remain standing on a steel platform in the surf zone while waves crashed over them, and instructors subjected them to psychological pressure designed to break their will. The platform was elevated just high enough that waves would slam into the candidates at chest level, creating a sensation of being repeatedly punched by the ocean. The metal surface was slippery, the water was shockingly cold, and the combination of sleep deprivation and physical exhaustion made balance extremely difficult. Sarah took her position on the platform as Instructor Chief Martinez began his psychological assault. "Martinez, you don't belong here. This is a man's job. You're holding back your entire team. Why don't you just quit now and save everyone the trouble?" The words were designed to find her breaking point, to trigger the anger and defensive reactions that had characterized her younger self. But the woman standing on that platform was not the same person who had arrived at Coronado months earlier. Instead of responding emotionally, Sarah focused on the technical challenge: how to maintain balance on a slippery surface while being repeatedly hit by waves, how to control breathing while cold water filled her nose and mouth, how to maintain military bearing while instructors screamed in her face. The answers came from years of boxing training transformed into a different context. Balance came from a low center of gravity and active foot placement. Breathing came from rhythm and timing between waves. Military bearing came from the same mental discipline that had allowed her to stay calm while absorbing punishment in the ring. As the evolution continued, something remarkable happened. Other candidates began focusing on Sarah as an example of how to handle the platform. Her steady presence and technical approach became a stabilizing influence that helped the entire group maintain composure. "Look at Martinez," Jackson called out during a brief lull between waves. "She's not fighting the water, she's working with it." The comment drew attention from Instructor Chief Rodriguez, who had been observing the evolution with growing interest. Sarah's approach was fundamentally different from the typical candidate response. Instead of muscling through with brute force, she was applying technique and intelligence to manage an impossible situation. When the steel pier evolution ended after 2 hours, Sarah was exhausted but unbroken. More importantly, she had passed a crucial test of leadership under pressure. Her teammates looked at her differently now, not as someone they needed to carry, but as someone they could count on when conditions became impossible. The pattern continued throughout the first day and night of Hell Week. During boat races in the surf, Sarah's coordination skills helped her crew consistently finish in the top 3. During ammunition box carries, her experience with efficient movement under load kept her team moving when others were breaking down. But the most significant moment came during the dreaded around-the-world evolution, where boat crews were required to carry their inflatable boats over their heads while running around the entire Coronado base, a distance of nearly 8 miles through sand, pavement, and surf. 3 miles into the evolution, Burke, the largest member of their crew, began showing signs of serious distress. His breathing became labored, his coordination deteriorated, and his portion of the boat began to sag dangerously. Traditional SEAL culture might have demanded that Burke push through regardless of consequences, but Sarah's medical hold experience had taught her to recognize the difference between productive suffering and dangerous breakdown. "Burke's in trouble," she called to Jackson during a brief water break. "He needs to tough it out," Rodriguez responded. "We all do." "No," Sarah said firmly. "Look at his color. Look at his coordination. He's not just tired, he's in real distress." Jackson studied Burke more carefully and realized Sarah was right. The big man was showing signs of heat exhaustion that could quickly progress to heat stroke. Continuing to push him could result in serious medical emergency. "Burke, take middle position," Jackson decided. "Williams and Martinez, take the heavy corners. Rodriguez, monitor Burke's condition and call out if he gets worse." The decision probably cost their crew a top finish in the evolution, but it potentially saved Burke's life and kept the crew intact. More importantly, it demonstrated the kind of intelligent leadership under pressure that SEAL instructors were looking for. Chief Martinez was waiting at the finish line with a stopwatch and an expression of grudging respect. Interesting decision-making back there, Class 352. We take care of our teammates, Chief, Jackson replied. Is that so? Even when it costs you competitive advantage? Especially then, Chief, Sarah interjected. A teammate who collapses from heat stroke doesn't help anyone finish the mission. Martinez studied her for a long moment. You've changed, Candidate Martinez. Yes, Chief. I have. As the first day transitioned into the first night, Sarah felt herself settling into a rhythm that would have been impossible during her original attempt at Hell Week. The key was pacing, not just physical pacing, but mental and emotional pacing as well. Instead of attacking each evolution with maximum intensity, she learned to calibrate her effort to match the demands of the situation. Sometimes that meant explosive action. Sometimes it meant steady persistence. Always it meant staying within herself, maintaining reserves for whatever came next. The sleep deprivation was the most challenging aspect. By the end of the first night, candidates were functioning on less than 4 hours of sleep in the previous 36 hours. Hallucinations began to creep in around the edges of perception. Simple tasks became monumentally difficult. But Sarah's boxing background had prepared her for this as well. She had fought matches while exhausted, when her body wanted to quit, but her mind demanded continued performance. The key was narrowing focus to the immediate task, avoiding the overwhelming prospect of the hours still ahead. During a brief rest period before dawn, Thompson approached her with something approaching awe. How are you still functioning? Half the class looks like zombies. Sarah was sitting in the sand, methodically cleaning her weapon despite hands that shook with fatigue. Same way I always functioned. One moment at a time. One task at a time. Don't think about tomorrow. Don't think about yesterday. Just be here now. You make it sound simple. It is simple. It's just not easy. The distinction was important. Sarah had learned that most of the barriers to exceptional performance were mental rather than physical. The human body was capable of far more than most people ever demanded of it. The question was whether the mind could stay organized and focused long enough to access that capacity. As Tuesday morning dawned on the second day of Hell Week, Class 352 had lost 3 candidates to medical issues and 2 who had voluntarily withdrawn. Sarah looked around at the remaining 18 faces and saw something she recognized from her boxing days. The look of fighters who had moved beyond exhaustion into a different state of consciousness. They were no longer ordinary people being asked to do extraordinary things. They were becoming something else entirely. Individuals capable of sustained performance under conditions that would break most of the human population. The transformation was as psychological as it was physical. By Thursday morning of Hell Week, Class 352 had been reduced to 14 candidates. The attrition was brutal but predictable. Individuals who had seemed unbreakable just days earlier had reached their personal limits and made the decision to ring the bell 3 times, officially withdrawing from training. Sarah Martinez stood in the surf zone with the survivors, watching as another candidate walked slowly toward the brass bell that hung ominously near the instructor platform. The sound of metal striking metal echoed across the beach 3 times, followed by the candidate's quiet statement, "I quit." The remaining candidates didn't judge him. By this point, everyone understood that Hell Week revealed truths about individuals that they often didn't know about themselves. Some discovered unlimited reserves of determination. Others discovered that their limits, while respectable, were simply not sufficient for this particular challenge. Sarah had discovered something different about herself entirely. The experience had revealed that her greatest strength wasn't her ability to endure suffering. It was her capacity to think clearly and lead effectively while suffering. The distinction was crucial and would define everything that came after. Boat crew assignments for the day, Senior Chief Peterson announced, his voice cutting through the morning fog. The crews were being reorganized to account for the reduced numbers, and Sarah found herself assigned as boat crew leader for the first time. Her new team consisted of Jackson, the former Marine who had been the previous crew leader, Williams, the ex-Army Ranger, Thompson, her longtime ally, and 2 newer additions, Martinez, another coincidental name match, a former Coast Guard rescue swimmer, and Chun, a former Navy diver who had proven remarkably resilient throughout the week. "Martinez, you have the crew," Peterson announced. Your mission today is to complete a series of evolutions that will test your leadership under extreme stress. Your teammates will be looking to you for guidance, motivation, and decision-making. Don't let them down. The weight of responsibility settled on Sarah's shoulders as she studied her 5 teammates. These were exceptional men who had survived when others had not, and they were now placing their trust in her ability to lead them through whatever challenges lay ahead. Listen up, Sarah addressed her crew with quiet confidence. We've all proven we can survive anything they throw at us individually. Now we prove we can thrive as a team. Our strength is coordination, communication, and taking care of each other. We finish everything together, or we don't finish at all. The first evolution was a timed boat race through the surf zone, followed by a portage across the beach, through an obstacle course, and back into the water. The course was designed to test every aspect of teamwork under physical duress. Sarah's crew faced immediate challenges. Jackson, despite his leadership experience, was struggling with a shoulder injury that limited his ability to carry his share of the boat weight. Chen was dealing with the early stages of pneumonia that he hadn't reported to medical staff. The combination of individual limitations with collective responsibility created exactly the kind of pressure that Hell Week was designed to generate. Jackson, take navigation, Sarah decided as they prepared for the race. Chun, you call timing on the lifts. Williams and Thompson, heavy corners. Martinez, you're on obstacle clearance. I'll fill gaps wherever needed and maintain overall coordination. The strategy was based on leveraging each man's strengths while compensating for temporary limitations. Instead of demanding that everyone perform identically, Sarah created a system where the crew could maintain performance despite individual challenges. The race began with a sprint into the surf, the inflatable boat bouncing violently as waves crashed over the crew. Sarah's coordination skills, honed through months of training, allowed her team to maintain synchronization while other crews struggled with timing mismatches. Stroke, 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 she called over the sound of crashing waves, her voice providing the rhythm that kept 6 paddles moving in unison. Hit it, hit it, hit it. When they reached the beach turnaround point, Sarah's strategic thinking became crucial. While other crews struggled to coordinate the transition from water to land, her team executed a fluid movement that put them in the lead position. Up, flip, set, go. For words that triggered a practice sequence, with each team member knowing exactly what role to play. The boat came out of the water, flipped onto their heads, and began moving across the beach in one continuous motion. But the real test came at the obstacle course portion. The course included walls to scale, trenches to cross, and barriers designed to be impossible for individuals, but manageable for coordinated teams. Sarah's crew faced the challenge that every team leader dreads, a section where collective success required individual sacrifice. The Irish table obstacle was a platform 8 feet high with no apparent way to reach it. The solution required teammates to boost others up, then figure out how to get the remaining members onto the platform. Traditional approaches involved the largest team members serving as human ladders while the smallest members went first. Sarah recognized immediately that the traditional approach wouldn't work optimally for her team. Jackson's shoulder injury made him a poor candidate for bearing weight, and Chen's respiratory issues made climbing difficult. Instead, she developed a different strategy. Williams, you're our anchor at the base. Thompson and Martinez, you're the ladder. Jackson, you coordinate from the top once we boost you up. Chun and I go last, using the rope system Jackson sets up. The approach was unconventional but effective. By putting Jackson in a coordination role rather than a physical lifting role, Sarah maximized his leadership skills while protecting his injury. By having Chen go last, she ensured he wouldn't be rushed in his climbing sequence despite his breathing difficulties. The result was a fluid execution that put them through the obstacle faster than crews with apparently superior physical capabilities. More importantly, every team member completed the obstacle successfully, with no one left behind due to individual limitations. Instructor Chief Watson had been watching the evolution with growing interest. Sarah's leadership style was different from what he typically observed in Hell Week candidates. Instead of driving her team through intimidation or inspiration, she was orchestrating their collective capabilities like a conductor leading a symphony. Interesting approach, candidate Martinez, Watson commented as her crew regrouped after the obstacle. Most leaders try to impose their will on situations. You seem to be adapting your approach to match your team's capabilities. Every team is different, Chief. Different strengths, different limitations, different optimal approaches. And where did you learn that philosophy? Sarah paused, thinking about the question seriously. Boxing, Chief. Every opponent requires a different strategy. The fighter who tries to use the same approach against everyone loses to the fighter who adapts their game plan to match the specific challenge. Watson nodded thoughtfully. We'll see if that philosophy holds up under maximum stress. Maximum stress arrived in the form of the final major evolution of Hell Week, a night navigation exercise that combined underwater swimming, land navigation, and mission execution while operating on less than 6 hours of sleep in the previous 4 days. The mission parameters were deliberately complex and ambiguous. Each boat crew had to navigate to multiple checkpoints in specific sequence, complete technical tasks at each location, and extract with sensitive materials while avoiding enemy forces positioned throughout the operational area. Sarah studied the mission briefing with the same analytical intensity she had once brought to studying opponents before boxing matches. The challenge wasn't just physical or even mental, it was systems thinking under extreme stress. Success required coordination of multiple complex variables while maintaining performance despite accumulated exhaustion. Here's what we're dealing with, she briefed her crew during their brief planning period. 3 water insertion points for land navigation checkpoints, 2 technical tasks, and 1 extraction point. Enemy forces at unknown locations with unknown capabilities. Timeline is tight enough that any significant delays mean mission failure. Jackson leaned forward, his tactical experience evident in his questions. What's our primary failure mode? Where are we most likely to break down? Navigation errors due to fatigue, Sarah responded immediately. We're all operating on cognitive fumes. Simple mistakes become major time losses. Secondary failure mode is team coordination breakdown under stress. Solutions: redundant navigation. Everyone checks everyone else's work. Simplified communication protocols. And we maintain team integrity regardless of time pressure. Better to be late together than fast and scattered. The mission began with a night insertion from boats offshore. Sarah's crew had to swim nearly a mile underwater using basic scuba gear, navigate to a specific beach insertion point, and transition to land navigation without being detected by enemy forces. The underwater portion revealed how much Sarah had evolved since her near-hypothermic failure months earlier. Instead of pushing maximum pace and risking exhaustion, she set a sustainable rhythm that allowed her team to cover the distance with energy reserves intact. 2-minute safety stops every 10 minutes, she signaled to her dive buddy. Check team integrity, verify navigation, ensure everyone's operational. The approach meant they weren't the first crew to reach the insertion point, but they were the first to arrive with their entire team operational and ready for the land navigation portion. Other crews had pushed harder underwater but reached shore with team members too exhausted to continue effectively. The land navigation challenge was where Sarah's analytical approach proved most valuable. Instead of rushing toward the first checkpoint, she took time to properly orient the team and establish communication protocols that would function under stress. Williams, your primary navigator. Thompson, your backup. Chillen, you monitor our 6 and call out if we're being followed. Martinez, you handle technical tasks at checkpoints. Jackson, your team integrity. Make sure we don't lose anyone in the dark. The checkpoint tasks were designed to test fine motor skills and technical thinking while exhausted. Disarming simulated explosive devices, completing complex knot sequences, and solving mathematical puzzles that would be simple under normal conditions but became monumentally difficult with severe sleep deprivation. Sarah's crew approached each task with systematic methodology rather than desperate urgency. While other teams rushed through tasks and made errors requiring repetition, her team completed each checkpoint correctly on the first attempt. Time management, she explained to Chun during a brief rest between checkpoints. Better to spend an extra minute getting it right than 10 minutes fixing mistakes. The philosophy proved crucial during the final technical task, which required assembling a complex communications device under simulated combat conditions. Other crews had reached this point earlier, but were struggling with the technical requirements. Sarah's crew arrived with sufficient mental clarity to complete the task efficiently. But the real test of her leadership came during the extraction phase. Her crew reached the designated extraction point to find enemy forces positioned in a way that made approach extremely difficult. Other crews were pinned down, unable to complete the final phase of the mission. Sarah studied the tactical situation with the same analytical intensity she had once brought to reading opponents in the boxing ring. The instructors weren't trying to make the mission impossible. They were testing whether crews could adapt their approach when original plans became untenable. Jackson, what do you see? 3 positions with overlapping fields of fire. Direct approach is suicide. Flanking routes are limited by terrain. Alternatives: wait for other crews to create distraction, create our own distraction, or find an approach route they're not expecting. Sarah was quiet for several minutes, studying the situation from multiple angles. Then, she noticed something the other crews had missed: a drainage culvert that approached the extraction point from an unexpected direction. "We're going underground," she announced quietly. The approach required the crew to low-crawl through a concrete drainage pipe that was barely large enough to accommodate their equipment. The pipe was partially flooded, completely dark, and psychologically challenging for anyone with claustrophobic tendencies. But the approach worked. While other crews remained pinned down by enemy forces, Sarah's crew emerged from the drainage system inside the extraction perimeter. They secured the sensitive materials and signaled for extraction while their competition was still trying to solve the tactical puzzle from outside. Senior Chief Peterson was waiting at the extraction point with a stopwatch and an expression of genuine surprise. "How the hell did you get here, Class 352? "Different route, Senior Chief," Sarah replied simply. "I can see that. Whose idea was the underground approach?" "Team decision, Senior Chief." Peterson studied the crew for a long moment. All 6 candidates were covered in mud, exhausted beyond normal human limits, but alert and operational. Most importantly, they were still functioning as a coordinated unit despite nearly 5 days of sustained stress. "Outstanding work, crew. Mission complete." As they waited for transportation back to the compound, Jackson approached Sarah with something approaching reverence. "That was brilliant tactical thinking back there. How did you see the drainage route when the rest of us missed it?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking about the question seriously. "Boxing taught me to look for angles that other people don't see. In the ring, the obvious approach usually doesn't work against good opponents. You have to find solutions that they're not prepared for. And that applies to military operations. That applies to everything, Jackson. The obvious solution is usually wrong when you're dealing with complex problems under pressure." Friday morning brought the traditional end of Hell Week, a breakfast celebration where surviving candidates were allowed to eat as much as they wanted of whatever they wanted. Of the original 24 members of Class 352, 11 had made it through the complete evolution. Sarah sat with her boat crew, sharing stories and reflecting on the experience that had transformed them all. The young woman who had arrived at Coronado months earlier, angry, determined, but ultimately unsustainable in her approach, had been completely replaced by someone new. The new Sarah Martinez was still determined, but her determination was tempered by wisdom. She was still willing to endure unlimited hardship, but she understood the difference between productive suffering and destructive stubbornness. Most importantly, she had discovered leadership capabilities that she never knew she possessed. Senior Chief Peterson addressed the surviving candidates as they finished their celebration breakfast. "You 11 individuals have just completed one of the most challenging training evolutions in the United States military. But Hell Week was never about surviving 5 days of hardship. It was about discovering who you become when everything comfortable and predictable is stripped away." He paused, studying each face individually. "Some of you discovered physical capabilities you didn't know you had. Others discovered mental toughness that surprised you. A few of you discovered leadership abilities that will serve you throughout your careers." His eyes found Sarah in the group. Candidate Martinez stepped forward. Sarah approached, uncertain what to expect. Peterson handed her a small wooden plaque with her name and the dates of Hell Week engraved on it. First female to successfully complete Hell Week at Naval Special Warfare, Peterson announced. But, more importantly, you completed it not by surviving, but by leading. Your boat crew had the best overall performance of any team during the final 3 days. The recognition was meaningful, but Sarah understood that it was just the beginning. Hell Week was only the first phase of a training pipeline that would continue for months. Each phase would bring new challenges, new opportunities to fail, and new chances to discover what she was truly capable of. But, as she stood with her surviving classmates on the beach where her SEAL journey had begun, Sarah Martinez felt something she had never experienced before: complete confidence in her ability to handle whatever came next. The angry young fighter from East Los Angeles was gone forever. In her place stood a warrior who combined unbreakable will with tactical intelligence, individual toughness with leadership capability, and the determination to excel with the wisdom to do so sustainably. She had not just survived Hell Week. She had proven that the most dangerous opponents are those who combine maximum determination with maximum intelligence. The Navy SEALs had found in Sarah Martinez exactly the kind of operator they needed, someone who could think clearly and lead effectively under the most extreme conditions imaginable. The next phases of training would test her in different ways, but the foundation had been established. Sarah Martinez was no longer trying to become a Navy SEAL. She was a Navy SEAL, with months of additional training still ahead to master the technical skills that would make her fully operational. But the hardest part, discovering what she was made of when everything was stripped away, was complete. And what she had discovered was exactly what her boxing coach had seen in that angry 12-year-old girl years earlier: unlimited potential waiting for the right circumstances to reveal itself. Those circumstances had finally arrived, and Sarah Martinez had proven equal to every challenge they presented. Now the real work would begin, transforming all that potential into operational capability that would serve her teammates and her country in the most dangerous places on Earth. Chief Rodriguez assembled the remaining candidates on the beach as the sun painted the Pacific in shades of gold and orange. Day 2, people. You've made it through the first night, but you're not even halfway there yet. Today we find out who has what it takes to continue. Sarah stood at attention with her classmates, sand in her hair, salt stains on her uniform, and exhaustion in every cell of her body. But, for the first time since arriving at Coronado, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. The angry young fighter from East Los Angeles was gone, replaced by something more dangerous and more valuable: a warrior who combined unbreakable will with the intelligence to apply that will effectively. Hell Week would continue to test every aspect of her character and capability, but she no longer had any doubt about the outcome. She was going to make it through, not by surviving, but by thriving under conditions that brought out the best in people who had it in them to be their best. The question was no longer whether she belonged with the SEALs, but what kind of operator she would become once she earned her place among them. I guess we will, Candidate Martinez. I guess we will. As she swam back to shore with her classmates, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The medical hold that had initially felt like failure had become the foundation for a completely different approach to the challenges ahead. She was no longer the angry young fighter who had arrived at Coronado months earlier. That version of herself had been strong but brittle, determined but unsustainable. The woman swimming through the dark Pacific waters was something new. A warrior who combined all her natural intensity with the technical skill and strategic thinking necessary to succeed at the highest levels. Hell Week would be the ultimate test of her transformation. But, for the first time since arriving at BUD/S, Sarah Martinez felt not just ready for what was coming, but excited to discover what she was truly capable of when all her hard-earned wisdom was put to the ultimate test. The words stung because Sarah knew they were true. Her determination to never quit had nearly led to a situation where instructors had to risk their safety to rescue her. That wasn't the kind of warrior she wanted to become. Ma'am, what happens now? Now you recover. You take this time to honestly evaluate whether you have what it takes to continue. And if you decide you do, you prove it by coming back smarter and stronger than you were before. As Dr. Martinez left the room, Sarah stared at the ceiling and faced the hardest truth of her life so far. Being tough enough to endure anything wasn't the same as being smart enough to succeed at everything. If she was going to make it through SEAL training, she would need to evolve beyond the angry, determined fighter she had always been. She would need to become something more strategic, more sustainable, and ultimately more dangerous than anyone, including herself, had ever imagined possible. Sarah watched Peterson disappear into the crowd, then looked back at the man who had first taught her to fight smart instead of angry. Now I find out if everything you taught me was enough, coach. It was never about what I taught you, Mija. It was about what you were willing to learn. And something tells me you're just getting started. As the celebration continued around her, Sarah Martinez, newly minted Navy sailor and future SEAL candidate, stood quietly contemplating the magnitude of what lay ahead. She had proven herself once already, but the real test was still coming. In 30 days, she would report to the most challenging military training program in the world, ready to attempt what everyone said was impossible. The little girl from East Los Angeles who had learned to fight in a neighborhood boxing gym was about to discover just how far determination, skill, and an unbreakable spirit could take her. The journey to Coronado would be just the beginning of a story that would challenge everything people thought they knew about strength, courage, and the limits of human potential.